small area under harsh conditions. Gaza is under very harsh conditions. But the most striking thing is that the vast majority of these prisoners have been born into captivity. They have never seen a day's freedom in their life. And the amazing thing is that you think you've seen it all on Al Jazeera or Press TV or Al Arabiya. Wallah, you have seen nothing. When you speak to these people, one is astonished. Every person has a story to tell. Either his mother's been martyred, his father's been martyred, his child's been martyred. His sister's been martyred, his daughter's been martyred. He's been either shot himself. You go into their houses and they have their pictures of their martyrs. Young children martyred. But still they can't break their resolve. They can't break their resolve. As Allah says in the Quran, when Musa ﷺ told his people, go into that land, what did they say? They said, قَالُوا يَا مُوسَى إِنَّ فِيهَا قَوْمًا جَبَّارِينَ. They said, oh Musa, in that land there are a mighty group of people. Those mighty group of people are the Palestinians. If it was anybody else, they would have cut and run. But they still can't break their resolve. Wallahi, these people remind you of the stories of the Sahaba. The brothers went to a sister whose husband had just been martyred. He left 8 children behind him. Have you heard the story of the Sahaba when they gave a piece of meat to their neighbor, and the neighbor preferred their neighbor, and the neighbor preferred their neighbor, until that meat came back to the first house who actually sent it. They went to this sister who had 8 children, husband martyred, no income, and they offered her money. And she turned around and she said, up the road there's another family who is in more need of it than I am. If it was us, we would have said, let's keep it for a rainy day. We'll buy something else with it. They went to the other family, who she directed them towards. And they said, go and give it to this other family who is in more need than we are. You've heard the story of Khansa on the battle of Qadisiyah, when she addressed her 4 children, 4 sons who were in the prime of their youth. And she said, tomorrow, I want you to wear your coffin and go into the battlefield. And all of you martyred, none of you should come back. And the next day all of them went into the battlefield, and every single one of them were martyred. And when she was informed, she said, Alhamdulillah alladhi sharrafani biqatlihim. Say, all praise be to Allah who has honored me with their martyrdom. The brothers went to a brother's house whose 5 daughters had been martyred. And he was telling them the story that his eldest daughter was very affectionate. She was loved by the community. And every night she would go to sleep with her arms around the other 2 daughters. And he said, when the bomb fell, when we regained consciousness, we removed the rubble, we found them in the same manner. They had their arms around each other. And the brothers, when they heard the story, they began to cry. And the father stood up, and he put his hand over their shoulder, and the father began to console them. He said, have sabr, for they are by Allah in Jannah. And then he had a daughter who was 16 days old when her sisters were martyred. He picked her up, and he said, by Allah, she is Allah's as well. If Allah wants to take her, He can take her. The brothers went to an old lady. You heard the story of Yaqub and Yusuf, that Yaqub cried so much over the separation of his son that he went blind. They went to an old lady whose son had been in prison for 15 years. No visiting permit. And she had cried so much that she had gone blind. And they say that she was telling the story, and they said, Wallahi, there was not a dry eye in the entire room. We went to Khan Yunis, we saw the placard of pictures of 24 young girls, who were martyred when they were coming back from school. 2 of them hid behind a car, and the snipers picked them off. What did these young girls do? It's amazing, isn't it? That the children of the Holocaust survivors adopt Hitler's tactics because this is what Hitler would do. If any soldier was killed, he would kill 400 of the resistance. For every Israeli which was killed, 100 Palestinians were killed. For every Israeli which was killed, 10 children were killed. This is what Hitler would do. But by Allah, let me tell you, in the eyes of Allah, these people are successful. These people are successful. It was in apparent defeat that Hamza got his title on the battle of Uhud. When Hamza radiallahu anhu was martyred, his body was mutilated, his liver was chewed, and they made a necklace out of the pieces. It was on this occasion that Allah gave him the title of Asadullah, the Lion of Allah. On the same battle, when Abdullah radiallahu anhu was martyred and his son Jabir was crying over his body, the Prophet ﷺ said, cry or don't cry, for I swear by Allah, Allah has never spoken to a person besides from behind a veil, besides your father. And he said to your father, ask for whatever you desire, it will be granted. And Abdullah, seeing how pleased Allah was with his martyrdom, he said, oh Allah, send me back into the dunya so I be martyred again. And Allah said, it has been decreed that whoever leaves the dunya, he will never return unto it. And then Abdullah said, oh Allah, at least tell the believers the status of a martyr. And it was on this occasion that Allah revealed the verses, لا تحسبن الذين قتلوا في سبيل الله أموات بل أحياء عند ربهم يرزقون. Do not regard those who are martyred for the sake of Allah as dead, but they are alive by Allah, and Allah sustains them. But wallahi, the slap, it's a slap in our faces that 1 billion Muslims can't protect 1.5 million Muslims. And what do we say? We don't want to say anything because we don't want time to become difficult for us. We don't want the authorities to keep check of us. We're scared. Subhanallah, what you scared of? Can you still feel? Can you still smell? Can you still see? Can you still breathe? There's 1,300 people who can't. Many of them children who were incinerated through white phosphorus. And we make excuses. We make excuses. Oh, we can't speak, we can't say anything. Every other masjid makes an excuse. Every other imam makes an excuse. Every other Islamic activist makes an excuse. You can make your excuses here, but by Allah, when you return to Allah, there will be no excuses. There will be no excuses. We saw the systematic destruction of the masjids. It was amazing. You know, they either destroyed the masjids or they broke the minarets of the masjids. You know, they wanted to demoralize the Palestinians, but they couldn't demoralize them. How many Palestinians I spoke to who said, you know, they killed 1,300 of ours, and they said we had 3,200 born. They can't demoralize them, because you can't demoralize a group of people who believe. They don't have no air force, no tanks, but what they have is Iman. And this is why they can't defeat them. You know, we saw the hospitals. You know, the hospitals don't have any windows. Because of the bombardment, all the windows shattered. So in winter it's too cold, in summer it's too hot. And the Israelis won't allow a pane of glass to come in. Wallahi, I went into a room, and this had nothing to do with the bombardment. I saw this child. She was so disfigured you couldn't tell if it was a boy or a girl. And she was, wallahi, in this excruciating pain. I recited a couple of verses and I went out. And it wasn't because of the bombardment. It was because of the siege. They don't allow gas canisters. So they have to use substitutes. And those substitutes are dangerous. And they blew up in her face. And you should have seen the pain